Malign Portents. Trespassers in the land of mist. The column of risen dead wound its way along the vast length of Obsidian Canyon. Glowing torches were held aloft by lumbering skeletal giants, their slow strides keeping pace with the death-rattle spearmen marching in tight lines. The corpse lights cast an amethyst haze through the thick fog, which curled around the marching ranks like coils of a hunting snake. At the centre of the macabre procession was a monstrous creation of bone and sinew, a pentagonal platform held aloft by scores of rotting cadavers. The palanquin was stitched together from corpses, enclosed by curtains of stitched hides. 2 thrones shaped from twisted ogre ribcages stood at the centre of the construct, and upon each reclined a black-cloaked figure. Both wore masks of silver and carried skull-tipped staffs. "We are so close, brother," said the rightmost figure, his voice a rattling whisper. He was the smaller of the 2, so slight he seemed almost childlike. "Do you sense it, Lucium?" "I do, Redcar," said the other, his skeletally gaunt frame swallowed by his long robes. "These mountains reek of illusion and deceitful sorcery. The mortar of sacrament is correct. That which we seek is surely near at hand." The necromancer sought solace in the thought. Their venture through the mists of Ulgu had stretched on for far too long with no sign of progress. He had come to despise this land, with its treacherous shadowmires, invidious predators, and constant pall of darkness. Soon, Lucium hoped, he would return to the comfort of the Sanctus Mortum, where he could once more lose himself in his experiments and studies. "What glory the Lord Arkan will lavish upon us when our task is done," said Redgar. "What profane secrets he might reveal. You and I, Lucium, first upon his black disciples, as is only right and proper." The diminutive man giggled. His laughter soon turned into a hacking cough. Lucium held up a hand, and his brother fell silent. Ahead, the front ranks of their vanguard had halted, forming a wall of shields along the width of the mountain pass. The necromancer peered into the gloom, trying to ascertain the reason for the delay. Slowly, the mists began to abate, revealing a rising shelf of obsidian stone, slick with rainwater. Spiralling high into the mountainside was a carved stairway, upon which stood a single figure. A statuesque elven woman, her raven-black hair whipping into the breeze. Gleaming metallic wings curved back from her shoulders, and she wore a sweeping headdress of burnished gold. In her hands she carried a wicked spear that glimmered in the umbral pall. There was a regal indifference to her poise, even stood alone before this army of the dead. "None but Cain's faithful may walk within the umbral veil," the woman said. She did not raise her voice, but her words echoed out across the valley with thundering force. "I offer you this one chance to tell me why you trespass here, before the truth is flayed from your wretched bodies." The brothers exchanged an incredulous glance. Lucium stood, leaning upon his staff. "These lands are claimed in the name of Supreme Nagash, he who is Master of Death," he shouted. "It is known that the so-called Shadow Queen resides within. He who sees all things names her soul thief, betrayer, and deceiver. Tell us where Marathi cowers, and you alone shall be spared." "You address her, dullard," answered the woman. She raised her spear high. I am she, the High Oracle of Cain, and loyal servant of his iron will. You have chosen the path of agony. I cannot say that I am disappointed." She let the spear fall. Shrill cries filled the air. The darkness surrounding the undead column twisted and reformed. Where before impassable cliffs had surrounded the necromancer's procession, now they were stood in a labyrinth of jagged stone, tunnels stretching away into the shadows. Pale figures boiled out of this maze, screeching blood-curdling oaths. Brandishing wicked blades, they hurled themselves into the ranks of the skeletal army. Dust and shattered bones filled the air as they whirled and leapt in a deadly dance. The death-rattle vanguard closed ranks, bringing their shields to bear. Spears thrust out with murderous precision, and many elves were spitted upon their rust-tipped points. Yet the enemy had breached the undead line, and robbed of their cohesion, the undead warriors were being taken apart. "No!" shrieked Redgar, appalled at the destruction of his favoured pets. He thrust out his skull-staff, which spat a bolt of amethyst fire. The flames enveloped a trio of elves, who thrashed and danced as their flesh crumbled to ash. Lithe forms slithered into view on the crest of the ridge, half-serpent archers with arrows nocked and ready. Their missiles rained down upon the column of pallid flesh and bone with uncanny precision, each smashing a skeletal warrior apart or piercing the skull of an oblivious deadwalker. Shadows flitted through the skies above. Winged she-elves dived down with breakneck speed to spear and slash at the necromancer's undead servants, then wheeled away with peals of mocking laughter. Lucium turned, thinking to order more of his thralls into the fray, but saw only a rippling wall of shadow magic swiftly encircling the palanquin. Half-glimpsed shapes moved beyond that impenetrable curtain, but no relief came marching through. The creature, Marathi, descended the winding stair. On all sides a fierce battle raged, but her expression of contemptuous boredom did not change. The High Oracle extended a graceful hand, and tendrils of night-black smoke lashed at those skeletal warriors in her path, smashing them into 1,000 splinters. She met Louisium's eyes, and her smile showed a row of perfect white teeth. "I have studied at the hand of the Mortarch himself." "Witch!" the black disciple snarled. "Your paltry magics are nothing before the power of Shaiish." He recited an incantation of terrible provenance, words that would have damned his black soul if he had already not sacrificed it many years past. A scythe of spectral light swept towards the matriarch of Cain. She raised a gauntleted hand to protect herself, but it was too late. The blade of soul stuff struck home, and the High Oracle staggered backwards, her body convulsed, spilling ink-black clouds of shadow that enveloped her entirely. There was a piercing scream of rage and pain, and Redgar gave a cackle of delight. "Oh, we must raise her to join our ranks, brother," he crowed. Louisium's blood froze. There was something gigantic moving, shifting in the darkness. Rippling coils of shadow lashed the air, and in the heart of the eldritch mists blazed a pair of hate-filled eyes. Bat-like wings unfurled with an awful tearing sound. Marathi, the Shadow Queen, rose into the sky, unveiled in her full and horrifying glory. Her half-serpentine form towered above the necromancer's palanquin, her formerly lustrous hair now a hissing bed of snakes. Her massive tail lashed out and snatched Redgar into the air. The black disciple screamed as he was enveloped in shimmering scales. "Brother!" screamed Louisium, but it was too late. The coils constricted violently, and Redgar's skull burst in a shower of crimson. Marathi hurled his crushed form aside and rushed forward the palanquin with a deafening screech of fury. She struck with terrible force. The entire structure rocked, slamming into the far wall of the canyon and grinding its undead bearers into dust. Elysium tumbled, floundering across the surface of polished bone. He felt himself flying free, the world spinning and whirling around him, and then he struck hard stone with shattering force, and knew no more. When Elysium finally woke, he found himself adrift in an ocean of agony. Every inch of his body burned. He lay at the foot of the canyon wall, among a wasteland of broken bone and piled carcasses. He could not move. Breathing sent racking spears of torment, stabbing through his flesh. Shadows loomed over him, lithe figures, clad in skirts of metal and wearing leering war masks. His eyes flicked to their blades, slathered with unclean blood. Their ranks parted. Another figure gazed down upon him contemptuously, her scarlet-black lips curled into a sneer. "Pitiful," Morathi said. Her monstrous visage had disappeared, replaced once again by an image of stately beauty. Yet her eyes were the same. They spoke of ancient cunning and limitless malice. The Shadow Queen nodded, and one of her warriors stepped forward to wrench Elysium's silver mask free. He felt himself being dragged to his feet by strong hands. Morathi leaned close. She smelled of bitter spices and freshly spilled blood. "You have angered me, human," she whispered. "That was unwise. In return, I shall make your death an exquisite spectacle. But first, I would hear more of your masters and the reason for your presence here." The necromancer choked out a bitter laugh. "You think the great Nagash does not sense every soul pilfered from his domain?" he spat. "You think your crimes will go unanswered? No. He has found out your little game, Queen of Lies, and he is coming for you." "Many have sought to invade Cain's domain," said Morathi. "All have failed. We have filled lakes and oceans with their blood." "You will see," the necromancer growled. The words were agony, but he choked them out with hateful relish. "Oh yes, you'll see. The Barrow Kingdoms are emptied, and unquiet spirits rise in every corner of the underworld. The skies above the Black Citadel blaze with amethyst fire, and the great work approaches completion. The end is coming, Witch King. Death will have its due." Morathi lowered the tip of her spear to rest upon Elysium's chest. "Mend this one's flesh, and have him brought to my chambers," she said. "We have much to discuss before I tear out his beating heart."